Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here to talk Road to Round 1. This is part 3 in my series, and we're bringing on the preseason games. Footy is back tomorrow, so we finally get to see some action, and which probably means we'll be doing a lot of chopping and changing of our Supercoach teams if we haven't been already. As always, thank you for all the support. Keep checking us out on all our platforms. The big one is Twitter, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26 if you want me directly. Thank you to all those people who've been sending me teams, especially after I did my last review. I'll definitely be doing another one soon. So if you want myself or the boys to check out your teams, either send us a message or just tag us in that. We've been doing our review of each team in depth. So if you haven't already checked them out, they're up on the YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, Spotify and Soundcloud. And then also we appreciate the support of our sponsor, Splash Vodka. Thank you so much to those guys. Now, into regards to my team, been doing a lot of chopping and changing, as I said, as everybody's been doing. Defence, been playing around with the idea of 3 premium defenders, also been playing around with no premiums. There is so many good mid-price and rookie options. That's sort of been what I've been looking at doing, but seem to always settle back on the 2 there. Now, I've got the money to move that D2 up from Dacos to one of the other big boys, but watching Dacos play the other day just absolutely dominated that intra-club, so he's come back in and sitting in as many teams as he is at the moment. I think it's like 45%. It's hard to ignore him, but I do like some of these other options. We haven't really seen Sinclair's role at the moment, but we know what he can do. Dawson, Doherty and Stewart are the obvious ones. The 3 of them are fantastic premiums. Sicily, I've probably dropped back a little bit more just because now with the captaincy, I think maybe he has to show that he has to be a bit more unselfish. We know he's probably been regarded a little bit of a selfish player, so I think that might be something to be mindful of. Where on the flip side, Dawson, new player, he's only second year at the club, he's been given the captaincy. It's sort of a license to, it's all on him, plays that sort of now quarterback role, halfback, maybe gets up the ball to, the wing or the centre, but I think everything for the back line when he's down there will be going through him. So I think there's more upside for him than there is probably Sicily. Doherty, we know his numbers in the midfield, and then even when he drops back halfback, great option. Stewart, fantastic ceiling. Just a little bit worried about, what to say, Bose or Henry. Is it, Radov, Galea, all these players head back in that back line and sort of how's the distribution. But I still think he's a fantastic pick. It might be a case that he could potentially drop 5 points, but until we sort of see how that setup comes to, tomorrow against the Hawks and see who the others are playing down there, we don't really get a real indication of that. So at the moment, I think Dawson's the safest pick. Probably have Dawson and Doherty and then Stewart third. I just want to see more from Sinclair. And then I'll have Sicily fifth, but I would be happy to have 2 of those guys in there if I could. The problem is, as I said, we've got Caulfield and Bose, and then that's before we even get onto the rookies. Ginby, McKenna's coming to my side, Weddle, Cowan, Sincotta, I think it is from Carlton, 102k defender, might have even gone ahead of Cowan now. And I've got the other guys in Constable and Campbell Chesser sitting in my midfield just because I can't fit them all in. So there's all these great defensive options, and that's before I think you got Ben Long and a couple others that might even pop up that we haven't even thought about. So it's really tough to fit them all in, and our sides are really guided by our rookies. So I feel like at the moment we've got a lot more defensive rookies. Now that might not be the case in the end, and if that happens like that, then I put another premium down there. But if it is, then obviously I'll flood my backline with the rookies and just hope that they're best 18, and that if they look like they're going to be bench players or on the verge of that sub, then they won't come in. But if they are starting in the 18, they're starting on the field through both preseason games, then it's hard to ignore. So that's what I've got there with the Dawson, Dacos, and then the 3 rookie. Well, Caulfield will count as a rookie, the 3 rookies, the 2 on the bench, and then with the 2 in the midfield. And it gives me a little bit of confidence there because it's not just Gimpy in that defence, it's the option to have Constable or Chess to swap into that if those two are named and playing. So it's kind of playing a 10-man defence. Midfield, Laird has come in to join Oliver, not only because he's such a good player and so dominant, but I just like the fact that I can go down. It's easier to go down than it is to go up. I've had Mills in there, Jack Steele, obviously. So there's a few options I can look at. That gives me 60k or 100k if I drop down. Even played with Darcy Parish. I do like his fixture. So they're hard to ignore those sort of players. So I kind of do like that setup. I've even pushed Tom Green to M5 at one stage to see what it looks like with the extra one in there. I played around with putting in, I had two, but unfortunately with his injury, I'm not going to sort of touch him now with the 2 preseason games he's missing. But, what did it look like with Laird, Oliver, Mills and Lachie Neale? And just start with all the big dogs, or try to play with all the value players, and you add Brayshaw and Cripps and Tom Mitchell and that. So there's a bit of playing with that midfield at the moment, but I think I do like the 3 and then Tom Green. And Tom Green could still become a Tom Mitchell, for example, but I think it's just his midfield and he's the one. But maybe 60k more, drop Laird down to say Mills. Tom Green goes up to Steele. Does that look a bit more safer potentially? So there's some options there I can deal with the midfield, but that same sort of structure, it's sort of 4 of them. I think that makes it a bit more stronger for my whole team. Then Hopper outside that moment where he went to M6 has been locked in at M5 the entire time. Just think, we know what he's going to be doing playing midfield, so nothing to really talk about there. Dom Sheed went down to Finn Callahan. Finn Callahan's had 2 good hitouts in intra-club games, so I want to see a couple more of that. I don't think, unless Sheed really dominates, I don't think I'll go back up to him. It's more a question is Finn Callahan goes down, if like Mateus Filippouli or someone like that looks like must have, and I know Filippouli can play in the in the forward line, but just potential options there to say drop somebody to make 80k or maybe another 120k if it's a 120k rookie. So it's again easier to find a player to go down to. Potentially could go up to say a Jai Cully, but I'm not 280. I'm not in love with that price point. It's the same with say Jaden Hunt in that back line, 285. Not in love with it, but then if they get the role and they look like they're averaging 85 to 90, they are hard to ignore. Ashcroft and Phillips hasn't changed. And then we talked a bit about the bench with Oscar Baker being pretty well locked in there from the start. Looks like he's got that wing role that Lachie Hunter's left him at the Bulldogs after crossing over from Melbourne. Probably the big change is the ruck. Teakle is sitting in my R2 at the moment. Now, the reason for that is he did start as ruck 1 against Lysett the other day. I've had Lysett in there. I've had English, Wits. I've been playing around with a lot of it. Now, Darcy Cameron is in my forward line at the moment. He's the one that I prefer at R2 if he's all fit and firing and he looks like he's got the majority of the ruck time at Collingwood. Teakle's more in there as an expensive rookie, so it's an easy one if it wasn't Teakle. That, say, it could be Radigalia, save 20k, go down to Radigalia, or Darcy Cameron goes back to that R2, Teakle comes out and bring in a forward, so it could be an Oscar Allen, a King, Filippouli, somebody even cheaper, a Richards, for example. So there's plenty of options there. So again, it's like he's more of that forward rookie if I could put Teakle there, but I would only ever consider somebody like him if I had cover like a Darcy Cameron that I can swap in at any point. But I don't think that's the way I'd go. But then if these 2 practice games and for whatever reason Teakle is the first choice at 198k, it's hard to ignore because could we get 5 or 6 games out of him at some point? How long's Finlayson out? Does Lysett, do they look at doing something different there? It's an interesting one. But then Port have so many tall options up forward too. So I don't know if that's the sort of 2-ruck system, but when Finlayson comes back in, that's the sort of system they want to play. So maybe it is Teakle and Lysett. I've got a lot of questions about that, but for now we're just treating him as a expensive forward rookie. That forward line hasn't changed. Dunkley, Cogs, Rosie and Taranto. I did take Taranto out and put Heaney in there, or I did play with the idea of taking Taranto out and putting that extra defender, premium defender, but they're just the forward options I just don't like at all. So that's kind of where I keep going back to and go, no, can't. I'm not a huge fan of King. I think, unless he comes out and kicks a big bag, he's not really going to go up in scoring. So, yeah, it's just how I don't like that setup unless I have McLean sort of at F6. I've seen some people even have McLean at F4, and I just think it's way too thin in the forward line. But, these rookies might surprise us. There is still like a Tyler Brockman, missed all of last year, but could be a good option at 123k. We've got Fergus Green and Noah Long sitting there. Green with, no Gunston and who's missing from there from Hawthorn? Mitch Lewis. So, as a mature ager, he's got some job security for a while. He played for the Bulldogs, been playing at Box Hill. So, definitely we'll see some game time. But then how's he scoring? Noah Long. Willie Rioli's gone, so he's got a forward pocket opportunity. But then forward pocket at West Coast, we're going to see only 20s and 30s. Is that really what we want? So there's questions there for my setup for the forward line. That's why I really like to go really deep. Zeebel's been in there for a while. If he gets that half-back role, it's somebody I'm very interested in keeping in that side. And there might be a little bit, that's where, say, Laird and maybe Oliver come down and Darcy Cameron goes back to that ruck line, and then Teakle goes up to get that 350k. I feel a bit more confident there with that sort of setup. Even maybe it's, Heaney comes back in, but then does that leave me too short in the future for the forward line? But we do think Dunkley, Cogs, Rosie, Taranto should all be up there. There's also Zach Butters, Heaney, but then what happens if somebody gets dual position? I don't know if there'll be that many who will get the dual position this year, but there's, you've got to at least probably keep one spot, maybe two for that. So there is a bit of thinking around that. That's sort of where I'm at the moment. And the big ones, I'll be looking at that how D2, how even my M1, M2 setup comes around, and then that R2 spot, which everybody's sort of been tossing up about. So hopefully we get some answers during the preseason. Now, we've got on Supercoach, on Twitter, Klopp Supercoach, and I think his handle is at, and I'll get this right, at Notorious Redmond. So he's put up a bit of a Excel spreadsheet of players to be focusing on for the next few games, over Thursday and Friday. So that we've got them. I think they're on KO, hopefully Foxtel as well. Unfortunately, some of these games overlap, which is a bit frustrating. So I think there's going to be some flicking back and forward between them. So we've got the Cats and Hawks and Suns and Dons tomorrow, 4 p.m. and 5 p.m., which is a little bit annoying. So he's got Stewart, Bowes, Clark and Radigalia, and then for the Hawks, Sicily, Meek, Day, McDonald, Warple, McKenzie, Whittle and Green to focus on. For the Cats, I'd add Tanner Bruin with that. The Hawks, McKenzie is actually ruled out, so a few people have him in, 180k. I would take him out of your side and look at other options. The ones that probably stand out there for me is Bowes. What role does he get? Is he around the midfield? Is he in the half-back where he's more used to? Radigalia, there's rumours about him playing in a permanent back position. So is it sort of him and DeConning, where if he's up forward, Hawkins and Cameron are going to come back after. I think they're both going to miss round one, but that'll see him come back out of that side again. I know even Plissarves has been mentioned by a few people. So how do the Cats set up even their ruck line up with Stanley, and where does Plissarves play? So a couple of interesting ones there. And for the Hawks, probably that midfield lineup, where everybody's talking about, is Will Day the one that's going to get more midfield time? Is it Warple? They've still got players like your Connor Nash, and that's on top of, before we go, your Newcombs and your Wards. So, who is getting majority of the CBAs? Or I always say, is it a Gold Coast where they've got the three main guys, or is it GWS where they run 6 or 7 players through there? So that's kind of what we're looking for Hawthorn. Next, we've got the Suns versus the Dons. So, the big one, and I think this is a bit of fool's gold because we've talked about the Suns with their CBAs. Touk, Anderson and Rao get the majority of them. Touk is out for both preseason games, which is annoying because everybody wanted him in your team. It looked fantastic, but that soft tissue injury just scares me off. So Flanders is apparently meant to be the next person in line. Does he stay in the role that he was meant to, and do they bring in somebody else, your Fiorini's or your Conor Blakely's or whatever, why Tuke is out? Or does Flanders now get to step up? But is that going to put us in a false sense of security because he'll come out and maybe dominate these 2 games? And then Tuke comes in, and then until we get another injury to a Rowell and Anderson or Tuke, Flanders doesn't become a good choice. So for me, it's kind of actually crosses Flanders off if he is playing full-time midfield, because it's just like, well, he's going to lose that once Tuke comes out off. So, yeah, I think that's a bit frustrating to actually see what the role would have been. Charlie Constable and Ben Long are the other 2 that interest, because, who's coming off that half back? They've also got, your Brandon Ellis, Will Powell, few options that play down there. So which one of them is that more attacking half back? Kind of think of like Sard from Carlton. So that's what I'm kind of looking for them. For the Bombers, we know, Merritt's been named captain. Merritt and Parrish will do their thing. Who joins them in that midfield? Is it Caldwell and Shield, or do we get somebody like a Perkins comes up? Redmond and Ridley, that's a big discussion as well. Who's that interceptor and distributor through the back from the back line? Or was it McGrath dropping back out there to help? They've also got players like Nick Hind. And then Nick Martin, is it him and Durham on the wings, or do they look at other options too? So a few questions there. They've also got that forward line, Tipper, and he did some nice things the other day, but still some fitness concerns. So is it a Menzies or an Orwin Davey that people are kind of looking at? There's a couple of questions there. The morning game on Friday is North Melbourne versus Richmond. Nothing really to say about the Tigers, Taranto Hopper. And that's pretty self-explanatory anyway. It's the midfield. Cunnington came back and just looked so good for them. Adds to their midfield. So LDU, Cunnington, but it's who else joins them in there. But we're hoping it's going to be Will Phillips. They've already got your Simpkins and your Greenwoods. They've added Liam Shields to that. Is it Will Phillips gets up the ground with Powell? How do they work? And then that's before you take in your Harry Sheasel, a Wardlord. So they've got all these options now. Talk about Sheasel coming off the half-back line, but then we've heard about Godo with Blake Drury. And then if it's Zeeble, well, he's the one that we know can score really well. So they've got quite a lot of options being talked about, but who is the one that they start? So we're looking best 18, start of the game, who's in those positions, and that'll help us, sort of decide. And then even with North, it's the ruck, Goldie, Cherry. We've heard that Comden's meant to be starting round 1. So what happens with Coleman Jones? Ben Brown. Ben Brown's not there anymore. That's Melbourne. I'm trying to think who their other forward is. But they actually do have quite a few tall forward options up there. So it's a tough one to sort of get a read on. And I don't like, even we're talking about it in draft going, okay, is like Goldie an option of that? And it's hard because you think at some point that they're going to rotate through it. Like we saw Cherry get games last year. So I think they've actually got so many options. I think Clarkson's going to play around with it to see who's his sort of best, maybe 30 to go forward. And there'll be a lot of chopping and changing at North come the end of the year. We've got Carlton versus Collingwood for Icon at 11 a.m. For the Blues, how does that midfield set up? I think everyone's like, oh no, Hewitt and Walsh and that, how are they going to go? But they've still got guys like your Kennedys and Cherrers. Be awesome in that midfield, but Hewitt and Walsh will come back eventually. So that's something. How does Sard go without Williams? We saw what he did last year. Does that continue? And then the half-backs and back pockets. So does Newman push out? Does Cowan or Cincotta, I think it is, or Cincotta, how do they come in? And who's the one that's probably starting in that back pocket? So they're very interesting players. He's listed David Cunningham. Poor bloke's injured again, so just cross him off your list, unfortunately. But does that open the door for a Hollands or a Binns? They've got some cheap options. The problem with the Blues list is they pay probably their best 8 to 12 players like ridiculously large money. And it's sort of the GWS setup. There's so many guns there, but because you've put so much salary cap into these guys, you've got to have cheaper guys and younger players to, sort of fill the rest of your list. So there are opportunities a lot of the time because, they're just so top-ended with their salary cap. So we might see some of these guys, and that's how the Blues are going to improve anyway. They need some of these young talent to come through and push them up to the next level because they're best players are already playing at their maximum. Like, they're not going to get any better out of Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay and Wiedering. These guys are playing as well as they can. Cripps just won the Brownlow. It's not like he's improving. So, yeah, they've got to find improvement somewhere. And the Pies. We've got the fantasy pig. Does he just run around and do whatever he wants? Tommy Mitchell in there. Does Nick Dacos join him next to him? A lot of interest about Dacos' role. Cameron versus Cox, and sort of how's the CBA breakup with that? So that'll be very interesting. Jai Richards and Ed Allen, another two interesting rookies for that. Ed Allen came home like a house on fire in the under-18s last year. I think he was about top 50 mid-year and went pick 19. If the season went another month, I think he probably goes top 10. Could he push himself on a wing role? Does Richards get on the starting 18 in a half-back role? There's some talk about, but I think he's more bench, if that. So there's a couple interesting rookies there to watch. 12 p.m. is the Sydney Lions game. For Sydney, that midfield, it's all about that midfield. Mills, Warner, Rowbottom. They've got guys like Florent who can run through there, and that's without going Parker and Heaney. I think it's just because Kenny's retired, but how many CBAs did he actually really have compared to some of these other players last year? We really want to see Mills locked in that midfield, but I just don't see it happening. I think he will still do a little bit of Mr. Fix-It, but, the other guy's just a gun, so we would love to see Heaney in there a bit more as well, but it's hard because you want to see Warner in there. You want to see Rowbottom's such a good player too. They've got a lot of options. Also, Sydney's Ruck, like Hickey's starting to come into a few teams too, so is he fit and firing? So it's an interesting one there. And Francis, does he line up next to the McCartan boys? 189k. I think he's forward defender. He's left Essendon for a reason, for opportunity. Go to the Swans, second best team in the comp last year. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. Maybe, he is locked in there. Where for the Lions, it's all about Neil, Dunkley, Ashcroft in that midfield. Does that help improve Big O for this year? No disrespect to Lions and Zorko, both very good players, but their midfield looks just looks so much better now. So does that improve Big O's output because he's hit outs to advantage? And McKenna and Wilmot, believe McKenna started the other day at half back and Wilmot on the wing. Is that how they go with tomorrow? On Friday, and is that how they go the next preseason game after that? Because if it is, we'll be trying to fit both those players into our teams. So, a bit to watch there. St Kilda, Melbourne, a lot to watch for St Kilda. How does Ross Lyon do this? They've got a lot of options that can run through that midfield, but they've always been sort of same. Firstly, even with the Rucks, is it Marshall or Tom Campbell, and what's the split there? We expect Jack Steele, obviously, to be locked in there, but is it Sinclair next to him? Do you get guys like Hunter Clark getting the opportunity to run through that midfield? Winghagen's another one that's got some interest. Does Mateus Filipui come in? Bytel? So many options there. Backline also, is it Caulfield? Is he what is his role in that backline? We want to see him getting that ball and distributing it up the ground. So. There's a bit of talk there. They've also brought in Caminiti up in that forward line, 102k forward. So they've got some injuries up that forward line. So does he get a role and how much of it? So Saints have going to be one of those teams that, this could be really awesome for us or it could be really bad for us. And at times I've had 5-6 Saints players in my side. And there's other times where I just take them all out because not a lot's coming out from St Kilda. They've been very secretive about how they line up. So that's an interesting one. D's not so much because they've been so good for 2 years. Most of they're priced at what they are. There's not really any value in the D's. Gawn versus Grundy and that ruck time is probably the big one. And then is it a case of who is lining up in that midfield? Do they try to spread it out a bit more? Brayshaw, Petrarca, Viney, a few others run through there? Or is it sort of like, okay, these are our 3 or 4 best players. They're the ones locked in that midfield. Freo versus Adelaide, 6:15 on the Friday night. For the Dockers, Darcy versus Jackson, how much midfield time or how much ruck time is both getting, and then what's the role if they're not? Does Darcy spend more time working on that forward craft? Does Jackson, is he the one that starts in that midfield? Young and Fife are both interesting ones. They played on each other the other day. So Fife's playing in that forward role, but how much time does he get up the ball and that, and how much with a softer drill can he dominate in the forward line? How many intercepts can Young get? Is it what we talked about the other day, where it depends on how much ball was going through one side compared to the other? And then, is it Luke Ryan and Chapman and these other guys that get more of a role? Matty Johnson, does he get an opportunity? And if he does, is it in that midfield? And Liam Henry's one. Can he get on that wing? Now, no Darcy Tucker, no Blake Acres. There's opportunities there. High draft pick. They want to invest in him. I think he's out of contract too. So definitely one that could be a potential to look at for our forward lines if he has the right role. But again, we need to see this. And the last game, West Coast Port Adelaide. Start off with Port first because West Coast way more relevant. But Rosie and Butters, and even to affect Jason Horne-Francis, do these guys start in the midfield with Wines, and which ones is it, and how long do they stay playing it? Is it a case that they all rotate? Is it Butters and Horne-Francis rotating? Is it Rosie? There's a lot of interest in those two, or those three. Definitely, we don't want to flood our forward line with Port Adelaide players, but if they are going to be the best players and they're going to play midfield, it's hard not to pick them. Houston is one that's been listed here by Klopp. Obviously, found him. He's way into a lot of teams last year, and then probably burnt some people, but very good off that half back and wing role. So how does he look? Definitely dismissed a lot this year compared to some of the other options, but we know he's a very good scorer. And then Lysett versus Teakle, and how's that set up? Finlayson out. So do they try to keep the same setup there? It's something I want to see how they do it with Georgiades, Marshall, or their forwards, and how that'll play out. West Coast is the big one. Nick Nat, how much time does he play on ground? Who's the backup ruck? And then who's in there with him? You've got Gaff, Kelly, Shuey, Sheed, Yo. You hope to see Yo floating at half back. Does Sheed get more midfield time? What's he scoring like in there? Is it Jai Cully? So there's been a lot of talk about him. I think he's about 285, 280k, something like that. So you want to see him playing full-time midfield at that price. Jaden Hunt in our defence, 285k. Does he have a wing role? Can he score between 80 and 90 playing wing? Makes him a bit of an option there. So that's something to think of. And then all these rookies, Gimby, Hewitt, Campbell, Chesser. They're the three main ones in particular. Who starts? Are they bench options? Are they even in the best 22? And then if they are in the best A team, where are they starting in that lineup? And Noah Long also comes into that, but he is locked into that forward pocket with Willie Rioli moving on. So he is an option, but then again, as we've talked about, small forwards. But we saw that last year with Rochelle. He bopped up and kicked 5. Nick Martin did the same thing. He became a bit of a keeper, so could Noah Long do that early in the season and get that price going. But then again, you don't really want that round one, because that cycles out too quickly. You kind of want him to go 40, 50 and then go out and get that big 100, and then the cash actually starts generating. But, it's not easy for small forwards and young small forwards to come in, but, on their day. So a bit to watch, and there's a lot to watch this week. So the most disappointing thing is GWS and the Western Bulldogs are not playing a game. They're playing intra-clubs. So probably the two teams I wanted to see the most, outside of maybe, say, St Kilda and West Coast, because I could really flood my side with Giants. As much as I said, that's Supercoach rule number 1, don't pick GWS players. But new coach Adam Kingsley, want to see how it's setting up, and we're not going to get a proper look at that. And the Bulldogs as well, we just want to see what's Bev going to do against a proper side. So frustrating, but we'll have to wait another week for that. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Again, if there's any questions you have, or anything you guys have seen, any pods that you're looking at, or rookies, and that we haven't mentioned, or I haven't mentioned today, definitely message me and we can discuss that. And as I said, if you want me to do a team review, send me that, and we'll definitely organise that video very soon. Enjoy the footy over the next 2 days, and we'll definitely be back for part 4 in the next week or so. Enjoy. Bye.